see you guys in the dark.
Honestly, my story is not too bad, though I would still rather never meet this person again. I was stalked, but not because they were into me, because they were into my best friend, Emma. Emma is gorgeous, like to obscene level, and has always had guys and girls fawning over her. She had a friend named Mike. Mike is who this story is about. I met Mike through Emma, and it was clear immediately that Mike was obsessed with her. She was actually into him too for a little bit. But she wanted something not serious. Mike came on hard and heavy, so Emma distanced herself from him. She distanced herself even more after he made some shocking comments about his opinion on sexual assaults, mostly being fake. When Emma and I graduated high school, we had planned to move in together, but due to a family situation, she only stayed at our place about 2 days a week and never on a set schedule. She also couldn't keep a job to save her life. Her family life was chaotic and made it where she would have to leave at a moment's notice. Emma also had several places that she crashed at. Family, friends, my family. It depended on her situation and any odd jobs that she was working. She did a lot of odd jobs: babysitting, yard work, elder care, catering, things like that. Nowhere stable, and often she wouldn't know what she was doing until that day. After Emma distanced herself from Mike, I started to realize that he was at my workplace often, like 3 or so times a week. It would not have been too weird, except my work was a department store for women and children. No men's clothing at all in this store. At first, Mike would just come in, do a lap, and leave. It was weird, but I honestly just thought that he was walking the mall. Lots of people do that, as my town was practically no entertainment. Then Mike started hanging out in the store and talking to me while I worked. Always talked about Emma. How is Emma? Why is she avoiding me? Those kind of questions. I was evasive, giving one-word answers, trying to tell him I needed to work. My manager scolded me for having friends hang out while working, when I explained I did not want him there, and that he wanted to know about my friend. My manager, he was pretty awesome, asked if I wanted him to talk to Mike. I said yes. I was relieved. After that, Mike went back to doing a lap and leaving until my manager eventually stationed a big loss prevention guy at my register as a deterrent. It worked. No more Mike at work. I had won. Except I had not counted on Mike being extra creepy. He started showing up at my house. Couple of points. Mike did not have a car, and I lived in a different town than Mike. My family and my job, about 20 minutes by car. No public transportation in my town, or in his. Uber did not exist in his area then either, and Mike didn't have a job as far as I knew. Mike knew where I lived because when I first moved in, we had a housewarming party and accidentally made the Facebook invite public. Mike started coming over at random times, sometimes early in the morning, sometimes in the evenings, always asking to speak to Emma. I always told him Emma wasn't there, even if she was. For her safety, I advised her not to come to the house anymore, and to tell Mike that she wasn't interested, which she did, bluntly, no more distancing, and then blocked him. And this time I moved in a new roommate, a coworker who, while also female, had a gun and a big boyfriend. Mike started coming by less frequently, and any time he did, I would tell him that he wasn't welcome. Now I know I should have called the cops, but there were 2 things preventing me. 1, I was from a not grand family who avoided cops for the most part. 2, my new roommate was a criminal law major, and she was already concerned about how that would appear on her career. Not great reasons, but for a 19 to 20-year-old, it was enough reasons for me not to mention it. Eventually I stopped seeing Mike, but I would still occasionally spot him places that I was. The mall, my town's grocery store, and my dog's favorite park. I stopped posting on Facebook around this time, because even though Mike was blocked, he was clearly still able to see my posts. I also got the creepy suspicion that he was coming by my house sometimes. My stuff on my porch would be moved. At night, my motion sensor lights would go off, and I kept finding Mike's cigarette butts. Also, it was the same kind that he smoked. My roommate had been there about 4 months when one night she had her boyfriend over, when someone started pounding on the door. When her boyfriend answered, he saw someone who looked like Mike running away. The next day, my roommate and her boyfriend went out of town for a concert. She gave me her gun, even though I felt safe, because she had gotten a dog. That was a training guard dog. I started watching a cooking show in the living room, and at some point, I had fallen asleep. In the middle of the night, I woke up to my dog, and the guard dog losing their minds, barking like mad out the window. There was a tall figure that bolted as soon as I sat up. I grabbed the gun, opened up the door, and yelled, "I know that's you. I have a gun. I'm calling the cops." Which I didn't do. I just locked me and the dogs in the bathroom and called my dad, who luckily was not angry about being woken up in the middle of the night. He drove over and advised calling the cops and filing a restraining order, which we called the cops, but they said since nothing was broken and there was no evidence, there was nothing to be done about it. Luckily after this, I heard through the grapevine that about a week after the incident with the dogs, Mike's family sent him to live with a relative in a different state. He did come back a couple of years ago, but he has been wise enough to only contact me once. When I got to tell him that Emma was not only happily married, but not at all interested in talking to him, I reminded him that I am willing to call the cops if he ever came near us again. He never did, and I don't see him anymore, though he did try to befriend my husband on Facebook. All it took was another block for him to go away. I am a female university student, and my story begins 2 years ago. Among the 3 classes I was taking at the time, one wasn't very crowded since the majority of the class did not choose to show up, because I felt the online textbook would suffice. The lectures were scheduled for twice a week. In a large structure hall, I sat alone 3 rows away from the back hall. This would allow me to leave early if I ever felt the need to without disrupting anyone's attention. Most people were pretty spread out aside from the large groups of friends who would sit together. I repeated the same routine consistently for about 4 weeks into the class, until another male student who sat another couple rows ahead of me decided to sit next to me one day. I was taken back a little bit since I did not expect anyone to socialize with me, as I often preoccupied myself on my laptop or my phone to be left alone. He immediately began a conversation with me about the class, which you could say was normal for college students to do. He was okay looking, fit, and about a head taller than I, if my memory serves me right. After about 3 or 4 encounters of him sitting next to me in class, he tagged along to walk with me on my way back to my dorm one afternoon. Usually I would pack my bag and leave class as soon as I can and say goodbye to him. This day was different. He got up to leave and kept talking with me as I exited the hall. As I walked down the stairs, he continued his conversation, telling me about himself. I was expecting him to wrap up his conversation and say goodbye to let me on my way. Instead, as I walked left, away from the building, he stayed by my side. I never asked him to come along with me, and it surprised me a little bit. We kept talking since I did not want to come off as rude. He became familiar with my building, but I never brought him to my floor or my room. He asked me to add him on Instagram and Snapchat before he left. I agreed to add him. This was the only time that he walked with me on my way back to my dorm. Later, he messaged me on Snapchat. Most of it was rather normal, and I could tell that he was trying to get to know me. For example, he would ask me about my favorite kind of drinks or places downtown. He told me where he worked and asked me to stop by sometime. I never did. He seemed nice, but something bothered me about him. He seemed very extroverted and excited to speak with me. It's not that I don't like excitable people. The way he was portraying himself towards me didn't feel genuine. Maybe he was nervous, I don't know. But something about his personality felt off. Maybe he wasn't compatible with my personality. I showed his Instagram to my mother, who thought that he was okay, and attributed to my behavior to being nervous when I explained how I felt about the situation. Our conversations continued over Snapchat and in person. He would message me, asking if he could swing by my dorm and bring me my favorite drink. I declined his offer. He asked twice before eventually dropping the subject. Eventually, it became clear to me that he was growing feelings for me. Recognizing this, coupled with the underlying and off-putting feelings that I felt about him, I started to have one of my male friends, or one of my female friends accompany me to the class and sit with me, even though they were not registered for that class. The male student didn't sit next to me on those occasions, and instead sat in a row in front of me, or his usual place a couple of rows ahead of me. This was a strange phenomenon to me, because usually guys who liked me wanted to get to know me and my friends too. You know how it goes. If you want to be my lover, you gotta get with my friends. I recall a few occasions near the end of class where he would sit with another female student in the class and talk to her a couple of rows ahead of me. It didn't bother me since I wasn't interested in him romantically, and I never said anything about it to him. He was still messaging me online. When summer rolled around, he would hit me up from time to time. At the end of July, he asked me on a date to the movies when university started again in the fall. I accepted, but only under the condition that he would do this as a friend date, since I wasn't interested in dating anyone, and I didn't know him very well to start a relationship with. I wanted to focus on my studies and minimize any distractions. He agreed to the friend date, but the situation took a turn a few days later. Without explanation, he removed me from Snapchat and from Instagram. I noticed this very soon after because I have an app on my phone that tells me who unfollows me off Instagram. I removed him from my social media as well. My classes resumed in the fall, and it wasn't until mid-October and November that he began bumping into me when I was leaving my class. We weren't the same major, nor did we share any classes. He bumped into me about 4 or 5 times that fall in the same place. He never mentioned removing me off social media or our plans for our friend date together. It was as if these events never occurred. His conversations were always the same each time. "Oh, hi. It's nice to see you." He would sometimes ask where I was headed off to, or how I was doing. I gave him very short responses since I felt somewhat uncomfortable with the situation, and I walked in another direction. In late February, he bumped into me again inside a building on campus. As I was walking through the building, I passed by a male wearing dark clothing sitting on the floor by our room, but I didn't pay any attention to him. I was early for my class that day, so I stood outside the door. I was alone in the hallway. I decided to go to my phone and try and pass the time. About a solid 30 to 60 seconds pass, and I hear footsteps down the hall. I didn't look up until I heard my name. "Hi." "I was just passing by. What class are you waiting for?" he asked me. Caught off guard, I told him the class, and realized the color of his clothing matched the male individual that I saw earlier. I asked him what he was doing there. He told me he was looking for the chemistry office, our room, which was the room that he was initially sitting outside of. He then said he was going and leaving out of the building to my right. About 2 minutes pass, and I get a feeling that his story was BS because the office hour room was down the hall to my left where he was sitting before bumping into me. I decided to walk to the bathroom down the hall to the left, which is past the office, and I'm walking. He was sitting in the same spot outside of the office room. To put it simply, this guy exited the building on the right side and decided to walk around to another entrance to go back and sit outside the room he was initially waiting outside of. It made my stomach drop. I quickly walked into the bathroom, used it, and left the building from the left side to avoid passing by him again. You'd think that maybe this would be the end of my encounters, especially when COVID struck. I was wrong. Occasionally, every few weeks or months, he would send me a follow request on Instagram and immediately remove his follow request after 1 minute of sending it, or most recently, after a few hours. This went on until a few weeks ago where I straight up decided to block him. My thought process was to ignore him and let the follow request pend because it felt as though he was trying to catch my attention. I started to tell my friends about this, and the more I started to think about it, the more it began to bother me. This is what led to me blocking him. With COVID, I feel safer in the comfort of my own home. I don't expect to bump into him in person anymore. Is this behavior towards me considered stalking or simply an obsession? Will my decision to block him anger him? Should there be any precautions I take for the future, both online and when classes resume in person? I'm 5'5", 135 pounds. That's my reasoning for being very submissive over all of this. When I started working at this fast food chain, I was 18 years old. I was excited to take my first steps into adulthood. This coworker of mine was training me, I'm going to just call him John. John looks young, 17, 21 at the most. We got along well. Light conversations about anime. I remember starting to change slightly when he was talking about a video game character, and none of our coworkers knew who it was. When I saw the green hat character, I said, "Oh, that's a Link. How cute. I used to watch my sister play Legend of Zelda." He looked at me and told me to marry him. I laughed and continued on with my day. For the rest of the shift, he would hover over me, asking me questions, like my favorite things, being friendly. I answered happily. I told him how I loved butterflies, that I was 18. I'm 20 years old now and have had several jobs since. When an older man asks you your age, it's never a good sign. Moving on to December. I've been at this chain for a month now. My manager asked me if I wanted to come to their company Secret Santa party. I agreed. When the day came, I arrived with my best friend. John arrives on the phone, acting busy and such. During the party, he was just on the phone. He tapped me on my shoulder as I was getting food, handed me a butterfly necklace. I didn't know what to say besides thanking him, thinking that he was my Secret Santa. Later, my coworker comes up to me, handing me a gift card to Walmart and a plushie. I asked why. She said that she was my Secret Santa. I thought it must have been mistaken, and went on with my night listening to my best friend tell me how I should date John. January rolls around, and it's his birthday. We were working until I heard one of my coworkers wish him a happy birthday. Being that person, I wished him a happy birthday as well. While my other coworker asks how old he's turning, he says that he's turning 25. Every shift that I worked with him on, he would be taking photos of me before and after the shift, commenting about my features. Again, I wasn't wanting to cause a scene. I just laughed everything off. I told him to please stop, but of course, he didn't. In June, which was my birthday month, I was working. I went to the back door. Due to COVID, I had to ring the doorbell and wait for someone to open up. Out of nowhere, John pops out of the bushes, handing me all kinds of stuff. Today was his day off, too, so I was confused. I remember asking myself, how did he know it was my birthday? I never talked about it. He followed me around for a few minutes before leaving. When I apologized that I want to get back to work and not get yelled at. In July is when I found a new job. I quit due to sexual harassment that I had to endure for 9 months from one of my shift leads. When a man starts getting handsy, you gotta shut that down immediately. It got really bad when that best friend that I mentioned earlier showed all my coworkers, including John and the shift lead, photos of me that she stole off of my phone. After being interrogated about that, I put in my 2 weeks. On my last week, everyone was talking about the shift lead getting laid off for harassment. John and I were doing prep, and the topic had come up. I told him about it, not knowing how everyone knew my story. The shift lead would often grab my ass, rub my thigh, talk about my boobs, and if they were bigger, things that they would do to my body. I would say stop politely, but it would always continue. When I started yelling and saying stop more assertively, he would often make me do humiliating tasks, like clean the freezer on my hands and knees. When I told John this, he just shrugged it off, said there was no reason for him to be fired. I remember being shocked. Told him I'm just glad that I'm leaving this place. A month into the new job as a hostess, things were going well. People usually just come there to drink, so I guess you could say it's more of a bar. On one of my 12 a.m. shifts, John stops by. I was getting frustrated when he kept cutting me off from talking to other people. I just walk away to go take care of my tables. He wouldn't follow me into the restaurant. After dealing with all of the tables, I go up to the counter to see my coworkers laughing. I ask them what's going on. The others smile. That's so cute how your boyfriend just takes photos of you while you're working. My boyfriend? The only person that they could be referring to was John. It dawned on me. How the hell did he know where I was working? My schedule, and all of that. I didn't tell anyone besides my parents and my sister. John came back a week or two later. I told the others at the counter to tell him that I'm not working, so I ran inside. I told my manager that this man keeps taking photos of me, and how it's making me really uncomfortable. The manager told me to stay in the back while he went and handled it. He told John that he has blocked customers from coming in. That's what my manager has told him, at least. My idiotic ass was popping up a little under the back room window. I freak out when I see John gets aggressive. He begins fighting with my manager when he tries to leave him out the front door. Suddenly, John throws his bike and tries going inside. One of the waiters was standing in the back room with me, watching the door, as another was fighting with John. I only heard yelling. Then all of a sudden, it went quiet. I spent the rest of my shift cleaning silverware and plates with another server. After that, people would walk me to the car, even if it was daytime, from December to January. He would pass by, but only from a distance. Since I wasn't needed anymore at my job and got fired, I decided to drive by a local mall. I look in my rearview mirror to see John. I try not to get the best of myself and knock it off as a coincidence. It really wasn't. He followed me throughout the mall, then later followed me as I was going home. So I drove for a couple of hours, got lost, taking all the random turns that I could until I lost him. I now believe this is how he would track me down. My car isn't common, but it doesn't stand out too much. I've also gotten many random messages asking about gifts, all of them from newly made accounts across Facebook. On one occasion, an account started sending me photos that I never sent to anyone. These photos were of my dog, just photo after photo of things that I've never sent, and ending with, "I have a gift for you." I deleted the app along with almost everything off of my phone. A week ago, I had to re-download Snapchat due to some dumb assignment that my teacher wanted us to do with that social media crap. One of my old coworkers sent me a message that I happened to have opened. "John wants to give you a gift. Do you want to stop by?" My personality has changed after all of this. I'm not as friendly as I was back then. It's been just over a year, yet I feel like I have aged 15 or so years. So at the time, I was about a 20-year-old male in college. Typical things going on. Personally, I've always been the type of weird person myself. It's a lot more of showing I'm not one to be messed around with than anything. So it's about around January. I've got this friend I had recently met, and for all purposes, I'll call her Miranda. So Miranda had been walking down a hallway with me, and another friend, I'll call him Jake, had accidentally bumped into this rather tall guy. I myself am only 6'3", while this guy was at least 6'5". Miranda was shorter, probably around 5'4". Jake was short, but African American. Fit, looked like he could whoop some ass. I'm decently built, like an old-style wrestler from the late 1800s to 1900s. This guy was tall, curly brownish hair. Don't quite remember his eye color, but he was white. So she bumps into him, and he turns to her, saying, "You know that bump was pretty hot. I bet your hair could smell nice going down my drain at night." So creeped out, as well most of my friends being decently easy to scare social awkward people. She ran off, so Jake stepped in to say to this guy, "I'll whoop your ass if you ever talk to her like that again." I'm standing there like this guy is pathetic, so he looks down Jake, stating with that kind of stare, like he knows that he is superior, but he isn't. "I'll eat you with a bowl of cornflakes, field worker." So I hold Jake back, because it was clear that he was ready to fight him. I look to the guy with a blank stare. "You know those cornflakes would be mighty fine with all 4 of your limbs chopped off for soup. You want to step into my dungeon, you slut?" This weirdly shocked this tall guy. We did end up learning his name from another woman, so we can just call him James. So the next few days, he was asking my friends about Miranda. Just normal questions, but visibly being creepy while doing so. So later me, as well as Miranda, were hanging out in her room. It was light out for once. She hears a knock on the door, so she goes to look through the little eye hole thing some of the college dorms have for their doors. It's that guy standing there with a sign that was turned on in his lower region of his body. So freaking out, she froze up. Noticing this, I walk over so that I could see through the peephole. So I'm not gonna lie, I'm pretty weird, but I'm not stupid. So I usually carry a knife on me, either in my pocket or if I need to hide it better, strapped onto my body because paranoia is a bitch. I pull it out, then open up the door quickly as I had my friend go into her bathroom. The guy goes, "Oh, it's only you, asshole." I lick my lips, holding out my knife, and I look at him. "Leave, or I'm gonna cut you and drain your blood until you die, little piggy." So he looks alarmed at this and runs off. I can't say for sure, but I thought he had a rag in his hands behind him. So I'm just assuming that he was planning on, well, the whole chloroform and the rag smell kind of thing. I talked to my friend after, and we reported him. We didn't report the whole thing, though, because, the whole part of me having a knife on these grounds would have not went so well. So I ended up staying for another term of college. Decent scores in the courses. This dude had left my friend alone for about 2 months. The last time he tried anything, my friend Miranda was walking with Jake, as well as another friend who is just as tall as this guy. Pretty skinny, 6-pack. To be honest, I found his friend pretty hot. I'll call him John. So the guy steps out behind a corner and tries to grab Miranda by the arm. And what happened next, I expected. Don't know exactly who did it, but either it was Jake or John had got the guy on the ground. They stomped him out pretty good. The guy was brought to the hospital and charges were filed. So about a month later, as I ended up leaving half a term early, came back a few weeks later for graduation, found out that this guy had been let go of police custody as well since the college wasn't the greatest. They didn't have camera proof of him doing any of this. He had been sighted outside of the windows at night looking in on people. No clue if they ever found him after. But it's just kind of weird this happened. All I know is during all of this guy usually left any room I walked into because I might have out-creeped the fucker to the point that he avoided me, which I found pretty cool, I guess. I'm 22 years old now, going to be 23, and my friends graduated from their courses too. And every now and then, I hear my friend Miranda always thank me for being so weird to protect her from this guy. Which is cool, I guess. Except I'm usually just this weird. I don't act on it. So I've been living alone in a foreign country for a year already. The last months I've taken a ferry to move, because the metro is usually crowded, stressful, and in COVID times is a nope for me. So ferry is always the best option. At least this was my thought until this week. On Monday, a random guy, who was probably 30 to 35, sat next to me on the ferry and tried to talk. I'm not good with the language yet, so I let him understand that I didn't know what he was saying. He kept talking and showed me his phone. He had just taken a picture of me. I asked him to delete it, but he didn't understand me, so I just ignored him to make him stop. It was irrelevant at the moment. On Tuesday, I noticed the guy was in the ferry again, but this time he greeted me and called me by my name, which of course surprised me since I didn't know him. He sat next to me and kept talking non-stop, but this time he went over familiar and tried to hug me. For my luck, a woman noticed it and sat between him and me pretending to be my friend. On Wednesday, I used the metro instead of the ferry, so it was normal. On Thursday, I took the ferry, and this guy was there again. This time, he sat far away. When the ferry reached the other side, I noticed the guy was following me. So I changed my route, and I went to a bus stop, which is next to the ferry port. As it was late night, there isn't much people around. I was scared, so I sat on the bus stop, and there was a couple waiting there, so I felt a little safer. But the stalker came and sat next to me, suddenly held my arm while saying, "Come, come, come," and trying to take me away with him. At this moment, I just held my arm tight and asked for help. The couple next to me called the police, and I did report him. I mentioned that on Monday he was taking pictures of me, that he might be doing the same thing with other girls. The police asked for his phone, and for my surprise, he handed it to them with no problems, like he was sure nothing was going to happen to him. When the police checked his phone, they found pictures of me, but not just from Monday. This guy had been taking pictures of me for months. Months! Not just on the ferry, but also in the parking lot, and even outside of my home. Besides my pictures, they found pictures of different girls, which I believe he had been following for months as well. The worst thing about this whole situation is that I filed the report to the police, but they couldn't do anything because the guy hasn't hurt me. So right now, I'm looking for a new place to move. Anyways, be careful, all of you. Creeps can be anywhere and everywhere. This happened to me when I was 11. I live in a small village in Serbia where none of this ever happens. My friends and I were home from a tournament in soccer that is played every year in the summer. It was almost midnight, and on the way home we spotted a shady guy. I'm going to describe him the best that I can. He was wearing a black hoodie and jeans. He was bald. We first didn't care and thought it was just a person going home too, but I had a gut feeling that this was not okay. So I told my friend calmly that someone is following us. We did 3 circles around a block, and the man was still following us. Just to mention, we didn't have our phones since we didn't need them, and our parents knew where we were, so we thought that we didn't need them. My friend wanted to run home, but the man could run at us easily, and even if we got into our homes, he would know where we live. So I told my friend to just continue walking to a 24/7 gas station. Thank God that my cousin was working in there, and we told him that this man is following us, and that we were scared. He told us that he's probably just going home, but we told him that we made 3 circles around a block, and that he was following us, and then he believed us. The man then went into the gas station, and he was standing next to me, and gave me a scary smile. At that moment, I was shitting bricks. I told my cousin that my friend and I have to go to the bathroom. We jumped out of the window and booked it out of there. The next day, a child was playing out with his brother in his front yard, and a man asked him if he wanted candy, and pointed at his white van. Thankfully, the kid said no, and grabbed his brother and went inside. My cousin is good friends with that child's parent, so he called me and told me everything. I wanted to report this to the police, but the man didn't harm us, nor the child. So we decided not to call the cops, because most likely they wouldn't do anything anyways.
If you enjoyed this video, please subscribe, like, and hit the bell for notifications on future videos, and become a stalker of the night. And I'll see you next time.